will be so fatigued that we won't be able to properly take it in. But anyway, Taryn, thank you very much for that. And we'll now go on to Ashley's presentation.
Sorry, my Zoom is not cooperating with me. Okay.
Yep, it's working.
Okay, so I apologize for being late. I had to work with my real placentas. So now I can talk about the artificial kind. So welcome, my name is Ashley Zubkowski, and this semester I worked on a project titled The Background, Physiology, and Ethics of Artificial Placentas. So placentas are something that are obviously very important to me as I want to go into the field. And I wanted to look at what type of research has already been done. And Dr. Van Manen significantly influenced my paper to talk a little bit more about bioethics. So feel free to ask any questions throughout the way if you don't understand, as this topic really requires a lot more than 20 minutes to fully understand all the complexities, but this is my attempt to do so. So the process of fertilization involves an egg and a sperm joining together. This cell then divides and creates a blastocyst around day 5, which can implant into the uterus. So a blastocyst contains an outer layer called the trophoblast or the trophoectoderm, which is a pre-placental structure, and an inner cell mass that eventually will compose the fetus. So a placenta is a fluid-filled organ that develops within the uterus and is essential for facilitating the exchange of nutrients, hormone, gases, and many other things between the mother and the fetus. So to understand overall fetal development, I will explain some significant stages. So the first trimester begins at week 1 after fertilization, and it's where an embryo must go from being a single cell to multiple structures. The second trimester begins at week 12, where all major systems are now formed. And around week 22 is when a fetus is now viable to survive outside of the womb, but requires a lot of medical assistance. So a preterm infant is born generally between week 22 and week 37. So the third trimester starts at week 27 and reaches until term. The fetus is mostly just developing fat and has some further fine structured development. And then a full term is at week 40, where the fetus is fully developed and is ready to begin the process of birth. So to ask you guys a question, what do you think of when you hear or see the words artificial placenta?
I imagine like that movie Alien. Remember where Ripley, she had several clones of herself and they were floating in tanks like that, something like that, like a tank with a floating body or body-like structure.
Okay. All right, yeah. If anyone else, no? Okay. So what I think about when I hear the term artificial placenta is I think about the society in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. So this book was actually first published in 1932 and looked at a society that used an artificial birthing process. So human eggs were fertilized with sperm in a test tube, and then the fetus was incubated until term. There was also a lot of other things that kind of added along the way and changed, but for this sense, it's very similar to what I think of. Although this isn't a real scenario yet, it's far from only being a science fiction concept. So there's 3 kind of main scenarios of an artificial placenta that I could think of. There may be more. So the first is an artificial placenta made of placental stem cells. So these cells would be retrieved and differentiated into different structures and grown in a dish to replicate a normal placenta. So this likely takes about the same amount of time as a placenta normally takes to develop. And for proper development, that's at least 11 weeks. So this is also might be really hard to implement, as good enough physiological representations of a placenta are not ethically allowed. So the stem cell structure would have to be significantly similar to the normal placenta for ethics approval. So for these two reasons, I don't really discuss stem cell artificial placentas much further. A full-term device would either have to be an artificial uterine environment where the blastocyst could then implant, or we would have to separate the inner cell mass and put this into a small AP device that could mimic and expand with the growth of the embryo. So this process is very complicated and is likely a very far future concept. So the final and most actualized device would be used for preterm fetuses. So this device would replace the neonatal intensive care unit medical equipment that premature infants use, and would further incubate them, providing nutrients in a fluid environment until complete development. So the full term device, meaning blastocyst to birth or full term, would already have some development steps already established. So full term artificial placentas would likely require in vitro fertilization. And this is a process that's already commonly used in humans. So in this process, sperm and eggs are retrieved from the future mother and fetus, or father. They're combined in a dish, and then the fertilized egg then develops for a few days and is implanted into the uterus. This scenario also kind of mimics the beginning of Brave New World, but a majority of the fetal development in this actually occurs in a normal uterine environment. So in full-term artificial development, this fertilized egg could then be implanted into an artificial uterus and develop similar to the normal process. So the potential timeline of artificial placentas is that the first research article containing the word artificial placenta was published in 1946, but it mostly discussed mechanical oxygenation, and it wasn't that close to what an actual artificial placenta would be. But this does mean that this idea has been around for a long time in the scientific community. So these actualizations of artificial placentas in humans for the future are complete estimates. This is just a guess of when I think that it could potentially exist. So in the next 100 years, potentially a preterm fetus incubation could be performed in humans, as there's many technological developments that have already been established. And in the next maybe 1,000 years, full-term artificial placentas could be developed. So the full-term artificial placenta is not really likely within the next 100 years, as there is so many advancements and research first needed to be performed. So the development mechanisms, protein regulation, gene regulation, nutrition, hormones, and many other concepts all need to be first understood for every single time period during placental growth for it to be replicated. So if we do this how we are doing it now, I don't know if this is ever going to happen. But something that could potentially speed up this process is by using artificial intelligence to prioritize mechanisms or proteins. That this is what we should focus on first, and this is what is essential for these artificial placentas to actually exist. So the actual research that's already been performed there is a significant study in 1993 by Uno et al., where there was premature goat fetuses incubated in a fluid sac for about 20 days, and they survived for about a week outside of the system with ventilation help. Throughout the next 25 years, there was kind of some sporadic studies, but nothing too huge. But in 2017, Partridge et al. Added immature lambs to a fluid sac for about a month, where organ growth and maturation was observed. So to go into this study a little bit more, what they used is a pumpless oxygenator, which is attached to an artificial circulation device. So this device is then attached through thin tubing or cannulas that enter the lamb's umbilical arteries and veins. So the lamb was removed from the mother after an incision into her uterus, circulation was established, and then they're placed into a biobag filled with an electrolyte fluid that mimics amniotic fluid. So amniotic fluid is significant as it provides protection, nutrients, and specifically allows lung pressures to be maintained for development. This amniotic fluid is then pumped through a system. So the umbilical cord is how the fetus receives nutrients from the mother and can be seen to work artificially, as you can clearly see the development of the lamb in these pictures from gestational day 111 to 135. So there's a clear increase in size, in hair, and overall development can be seen. So this process could likely be modified to happen in humans. So if a potential preterm birth was initiated, a C-section on the mother could be performed. The fetus is then connected to circulation and placed in a biobag, and then could further develop until term. So to explain the importance that these devices could have, 15 million preterm infants are born a year, and 372,000 were born in the US in 2017, which is more than 1 in 10 births. So there's a huge, I guess, market to help preterm fetuses. So to expand on the premature lung development, immature lungs are a significant issue that many preterm infants face. So the alveoli
Thank you.
are a branch structure that helps facilitate gas exchange in the lungs.
But I'll try to present with my laptop. I hope it will work.
Okay, yeah,
It should work. I
yeah,
don't think so.
wonderful, great. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that, folks.
So the immature, so alveoli are a branch structure that help facilitate gas exchange in the lungs. And these are significantly underdeveloped in a premature fetus. So the first breath is often known to be one of the most difficult, as the lungs must switch between a fluid to an air-filled environment. They must properly open and they can't collapse. So if a fetus has to undergo this difficult process that all babies have to do, but they have underdeveloped alveoli, then it's an even harder struggle. So the artificial placenta avoids this issue by creating a fluid environment that maintains the pressures and the fluid-filled lungs to help them allow for further development. So as you can see, the NICU requires a lot of medical equipment. So there's a ventilator that helps the infant breathe, which requires often an endotracheal tube in the infant's throat. There's feeding tubes, oxygen monitors, electrocardiograms, blood pressure monitors, IVs, umbilical catheters, incubators for warmth, and many other things. So regardless of the cost of this equipment, it also puts a lot of physiological stress on the infant. So many of these procedures require direct contact and have to be placed inside. They're loud and it's hard to control the temperatures. So when you compare this to the artificial placenta, the fetus is really only attached to the system by its umbilical cord, which is a lot more physiologically equivalent. So the fetus is also maintained in the fluid environment that can block sounds and regulate the temperature. So to clarify, the intent of a preterm artificial placenta is not to extend the viability of a fetus outside of the womb, but to help with scenarios that would already require time spent in the NICU and to avoid this step altogether. So the hope is that the artificial placenta would allow the fetus to mature all the way to term, in that it can be birthed and can go home with its parents. So eventually better technology could lead to extending viability, but would first have to go through even more rigorous testing. So the development of artificial placenta brings many physiological benefits to preterm babies, but with these manipulations come a lot of ethical considerations as well. So we've already discussed the 4 bioethics principles in Dr. Van Manen's class, and these principles work as a framework for understanding and guiding many medical professionals' moral and ethical principles. So the first is autonomy, which involves respecting and supporting autonomous decisions and involves liberty and agency. Non-maleficence avoids the causation of harm. Beneficence pertains to relieving, lessening, or preventing harm and providing benefits and balancing these benefits against the risks and costs. And justice is fairly distributing benefits, risks, and costs. So I will present the topics that I've already discussed in my paper, but I know there are many other ethical considerations that are required. And if you guys want to discuss this after as well, feel free, because it kind of just never ends. So autonomy can be split into 2 concepts, that the parents hold the fetus's agency, or the fetus itself at some point will have agency. So some people believe that an infant does not obtain autonomy, as infants are reliant on parents and they have complete control over the child's life decisions. So the other side mentions that even if an infant doesn't currently have autonomy, they will when they grow up. So in Canada, the parents' autonomy is respected, provided they make a reasonable choice and are not using their child for secondary gain. So with artificial placenta technology, the fetus is unable to make informed decisions, so the parents must decide if a preterm infant is to be added to the artificial placenta. When the infant grows up, they may feel that their autonomy was taken away from them or disagree with the parents' initial choice. So as the artificial placenta gives a choice of artificial placentas over the NICU, and a healthcare professional is responsible for the patient's autonomy and not the parents, there's many ethical dilemmas that may occur. So many of these concepts can also be applied to the full-term artificial placenta scenario, as people have even more controversial and divided opinions on if early embryos have autonomy. For non-maleficence, this procedure requires needle insertion and can cause immediate or permanent damage through complications. Non-maleficence can also indicate that not using AP technology when it's available could cause undue damage to the developing fetus, as the use of AP for preterm infants would generally be considered non-maleficent, as it decreases the physiological stressors or harms of that individual. It'll also help individuals who have a risk of pregnancy complications safely have a biological child. When AP is used for non-emergent patients or for full term, the intent is more complicated. It's not clear if a full term AP scenario would directly cause any harm to the fetus, but in the scenario where the inner cell mass may be separated, it could cause undue harm to the embryo, and that would not happen if it was left alone through the natural process of pregnancy. For beneficence, it can be understood through 3 different views. There's vitalism, sanctity of life, and instrumentalism. So the vitalism view indicates that all life is important, no matter the form or consequences. So vitalism viewers would likely use an artificial placenta in any scenario if it extended the life of the fetus. The sanctity of life viewpoints look at the worth of a life, but they also use distinctions between ending and prolonging it. So not extending a suffering person's life is allowed. So in this case, they would use an artificial placenta if it prolonged life in a positive manner, but may have issues not using it if a life would end through current medical equipment. So the instrumental view is based upon the requirement of life being of value, and it has to be good. So a good life can be prolonged and extended, and a life that is void of quality can be ended. So instrumental views are where the scenario becomes the most complicated, where an infant could be added to the artificial placenta to extend their life as long as the infant's quality of life could be preserved or improved upon to an acceptable level. The vitalism viewpoint kind of has an obvious and broadly accepted answer, as they'll always use it, but the instrumental view looks more at a case-by-case basis and is likely what healthcare professionals would have to use. So if a fetus were to undergo this AP procedure but would suffer excessively or would only prolong a bad quality of life, artificial placentas would likely not be used. So the use of artificial placentas in a way that promotes justice would mean it has to be available to all individuals. So this universality may not be physically possible, as every preterm infant would require a large amount of equipment and money. The best thing that I believe a healthcare provider could do is to create a triage list that's not influenced by money, status, race, or anything other than the fetus's requirement to survive. So this procedure would be very expensive, and currently IVF treatments are not covered by insurance. So kind of indicates that likely these more expensive procedures would also not be covered. So this then means that the costs come out of the parent's pocket and would be only available to those with money. So do you guys think that barriers to these technologies are a good thing?
I don't know. What do you think about overpopulation? Because that's another issue. We already are, in a way, beyond the capabilities of our planet to provide food. So bringing more babies in this way, is it fair for the planet more than for humans? I don't know. What does anybody else think?
I think this is more of weighing the advantages and disadvantages. Barriers can be solved once there is, critical move toward the advantages and minimizing the disadvantages. So I think it is a kind of rational thing.
So the cost will eventually come down. Like television was very expensive in the beginning and so on. So you can imagine that a lot of treatments which are only available to the rich in the beginning eventually get spread out to many more people, not necessarily everyone. So whether we're overpopulated or not is not easy to really figure out, particularly if we are populating other worlds beyond Earth. And if you look at it from an energy point of view, the amount of energy received from the sun is many-fold greater than what we would ever need. So, I mean, it depends upon what your metric is.
Can I also add that, like, while it would be expensive at first, there also would be a certain amount of like risk in trying it out. So it'd be interesting to see, like, I'm not sure if a wealthy person right away would want to throw their baby in an artificial placenta. Do you know what I mean? Like, they might have more hesitations and would rather go through, tried and true methods before just jumping on board with this. So it'd be interesting to see what demographic is used to kind of test the technology out.
So I will add that the Partridge et al. Study that used the incubated lambs, they said that the technology, if it were to be used in humans, the first clinical applications they would use are the 23 to 25 week old fetuses that technically can survive in the NICU and have, but the outcomes are extremely poor because they're just so young. Like, they're pretty much only halfway through their development. So that was kind of where that paper decided that the starting point might be, is the youngest kind of possible that they think would survive in it, but may not really survive outside of it, or at least have a good chance to survive. Yeah. So for a review, there's 3 different types of APs. There's stem cell, full term, and preterm. For the stem cell, it requires a lot of extensive knowledge and replication of a normal placenta. The full term is really far in the future, but could have potential through IVF and artificial intelligence. In preterm, the previous experiments have been replicated in animals and could help alleviate NICU issues. Lung development is really important in this process, and ethics, there's a lot of scenarios that would need to be analyzed first. So the real life implementation of artificial placenta technology may be more intricate and controversial, but advancements may soon rival Huxley's depiction in the near future. So it really is a brave new world of scientific research. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, yeah, well, there is something nice about the last presenter having chosen to be last. That wasn't really the case in previous years. And so the last presenter got a really raw deal in previous years, I think. But whereas today, yeah, I think we actually, we seem, you guys don't look completely worn out. So I think this will be reasonable. So what do you think? What questions do you have? Questions, discussion?
I have a question. Sorry, Eduardo, if I jump in. So I haven't heard a lot about risks of that technology. I believe, is it IF or NICO? I forgot. But I mean, what risks did they experience where they're growing that little lamb?
So one of the main things that they talked about was the kind of risk for contamination or for like bacteria to get into the process. And they had to use a lot of different materials to get the bio bag that they put the fetus in to be correct, because it ended up that some of them had kind of like, they would get bacteria in their lungs and it would cause issues. But eventually they kind of developed a process that was completely sterile, or as sterile as it could be. And that was kind of the main thing that they looked at for risks. There's obviously a few more with, you have to like cut open a mother and do this transfer. But I guess it's one of those things that like there is risk, but some of those risks are already kind of established as they're going to be a preterm birth. So the preterm ones, I think, have a lot more, I don't know if it's benefits, but it's like, this stuff is already going to happen. Like they're already coming out and they're already being born. So any risks that are already there are probably already existing without the help of the artificial placenta, where this is just kind of like a process that's trying to mimic what they're already doing.
I was thinking about the chances of blood clots, since they used like a artificial circulation system to provide the fluid to feed the baby, or to just move the blood around. I believe there would be some sort of medications that should be essentially used to avoid, as you said, contamination, blood clots, maybe, some other stuff that could happen through this artificial process. So this is apply another rule in the ethics. It's not only the process of being an artificial placenta, but what would be add up on that, and in which a situation, how far could that go? Maybe if that's in normal condition, you will maybe little, you need a little, kind of medication to control the contamination and blood clots and that stuff. But if there is any higher risk get on, maybe there will be more added medications or interventions. So, I mean, I agree with you that the ethics of this topic is really complicated and it would not be resolved easily, but it's a very good, approach. I appreciate your topic today.
Thank you.
So one thing that has changed a lot in the last few years is just the human acceptability of this as a topic that they're willing to discuss. This was something that just seemed icky to most people like 10 years ago. And the whole idea of children developing outside the womb and so on. And it's kind of similar to in vitro fertilization when it first began was extremely controversial, and there are all sorts of ethical discussions about it and so on. So anyway, the world is changing. This is not as creepy for you guys as it would have been for students 10 years ago.
Hey, thank you, Ashley. That was really, really cool to see. And I didn't appreciate too much where it could be applied when you asked the justice question. But then after you explained that it could be used in the NICU already, and it could be less invasive for the baby, I see a lot of benefit. But as Hadid said, maybe we will need to add more special antibiotics and other things to assist the baby's development without bacteria or any other side effect. And we don't know if that will have long-term effects, right, in the babies. But for sure, I think it's something that we may see in our lifetime. So that's exciting. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion? I want to thank you for staying so late, above and beyond the call of duty to stay until 4:25. Yeah, that's something. But anyway, four great presentations. I'm going to look forward to the editing that I'll be doing tonight and so on. Hopefully I can get them up there soon. So anyway, I've enjoyed running the course, teaching you guys in the course, and thank you. Please encourage your friends. I would point out, I'm not looking for you to push people who are wrong for the course to take it, right? I really want people who are right for the course, right? So if you're able to coerce somebody into taking the course, that's not good. But if you're able to actually get them excited about the course, and if they are part of that small cadre of brave, courageous, forward-looking students, yeah. So I welcome your help in finding the next groups of students for 2021. And I already have sort of a positive feeling that will turn out well. So anyway, thank you for everything. I'll be getting your grades to you. That's a two-step process. If somebody has to approve my grades, right? So it's not completely up to me, but it usually turns out pretty well. That person and I have been dealing with grading in this course now for 9 years, so I sort of know what she wants. So yeah, anyway, I will try to complete that as soon as possible. I wish you well. I'd be happy to stay in contact with any of you who wish that. As I pointed out before, to some students, and this is fine, this is just another course, to other students, it's life-changing, and their whole life is altered by the course, and it's never the same again. And they keep doing stuff with the course then for years and years after. So whichever of those categories you fit in, that's fine. But I would be happy to have future interaction with you. And now you're probably getting so tired of being on this Zoom call. Yeah, it's been almost 2.5 hours, if you can imagine it. So I think I will let you go. But anyway, I wish you well, and thanks for being part of the course.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Same to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
Thank you
very
so
tired.
much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.